Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome back.
Selamat pagi from Bali.
Mhm. Hmm. So, in the end of our last episode, we started talking about frequency and sound and the language of light and the energy coming through in language and words and all of this. And as we were just so beautifully dropping in with your beautiful prayer, what was coming through as a thread was to begin with speaking about even just the recording of the last podcast episode on the solar feminine and lunar masculine. And I think it's just such a good and prime example of this, the transmission of energy, the transmission of energetic information, where we actually had tried to not we didn't try to, we did. We recorded that episode on a day where the energies were super funky. This was like really close around when the planetary alignment went in, and there was a lot that was shifting and changing. And um, a group project that we're involved in was like bringing up all of these different things that we needed to be looking at. And we went into that recording, and there was this other energetic thread that came in, and almost like, I don't want to play as if this is, not something to hold responsibility for, but it's like being taken for a ride by the energy. And after we had done that, my brain was going, oh, like everything's perfect. We've got to trust what comes through, trust where the energy thread goes, trust what information comes in, and trust the flow of the conversation. Whatever comes out comes out. But there's something in my system that was like, this is like this, something in me is not at peace with this. And I thought it was the content itself that I was like having a fear about putting out into the world. But as I started to dig deeper into it, I was like, oh, the energy was really off. Like something in the frequency, something in the thread was off. And it's not the usual thread of energy from which we record and drop in and flow together. It was like there was that. I personally, I felt like you were holding the thread of the podcast as usual, and I was like, I don't know, off on some other some other train in some other dimension, and was trying to bring these two different dimensional realities together in some way. And as I was reflecting on it, I was like, oh, that felt really disjointed. And that's really interesting that I hadn't picked that up in the moment, but did in reflection. And of course, like all things, there is perfection, right? We needed that conversation. It was beautiful. It held its own wisdom and everything else. And it felt more true to come back around and drop in and truly hold the thread of what the energy of this podcast and this sharing really is. And when we got to re-record the solar feminine and lunar masculine episode, then the frequency and the beauty and the coherence of what came through was so potent and so rich and so beautiful and so clear and so peaceful. And I feel like this is the essence of like, how do we learn, embody, start to evolve into how we use language to transmit an energy? How do we notice when an energy is off? How are we, what are we actually transmitting all of the time? Right? Because it's like we're going into this time on the planet where everything is frequency, everything is going to be energy, everything is going to be so deeply felt. And there's been this fixation on words, there's this fixation on the actual language, as opposed to like the energy that it gets to come from, the frequency that is being brought through and in, and where does it weave, where does it get to go. And so for me, it's like coming into this time and getting to be more aware of the quality of energy we put behind what we're bringing through, what we're sharing in the world, what is moving through us, what is being created through us. And as I was reflecting on this a little bit this morning, it really felt like we can say whatever it is we need to say, we can share whatever we need to share, we can create whatever we need to create, if it's coming from the frequency of the creation itself. And I was looking back and going, wow, there are definitely times where I've been like afraid to put something out into the world, whether it's writing a post, whether it's like, you know, sharing an opinion, whatever else it is, or sharing a thought, a feeling, etc., etc. And I'm noticing more and more that the fear is not about, oh, what are people going to think, or some external situation around this. It's more this kind of knowing the frequency isn't right yet. Like it's not come into a coherence. It's not come into the intended frequency through which it is meant to be delivered and expressed and brought into the world. So it's like maybe I have a controversial idea or opinion, but if the frequency is coming from the creator, is coming from source, coming from love, it's going to feel very different. It's going to be received very differently than if I'm speaking from like a personal wound, or if I'm speaking from, you know, something that is unresolved within me, a judgment, a whatever it is. It's going to feel very, very different. And we're going into a time where that's going to become like just more and more and more important. Is like less what we say and the wording, and more about what is the feeling behind it. And there's a lot of words and language also that need distortions in them inherently, that also need clearing up. So it's like less about the content of what we're saying, more about the deeper understanding, the true meaning, the true essence, the true thread of the frequency that wants to be transmitted, instead of transmitting these kind of like mixed up, distorted ideas that have become convoluted or mixed with our own wounding and insecurities and all of this kind of stuff over time. So yeah, I feel like it's a great topic to dive into, because more and more of us want to share. We're getting ready to create a lot bigger in the world, to lead in bigger ways in the world. And if we're going to do that from a frequency place, where do we need to start? Where do we need to start in our understanding of this, or understanding of this, or awareness of what that looks like, what that feels like for us? So we've recently had our own experience with that.
Yeah, no, this topic feels very alive. It's really in the field, not just for you and I and how we're moving through the world in our podcasts and our own lives, but I'm just noticing it in all these different pockets of life and interactions with others. I was just talking to my dad this morning in the States about the language of light and frequency, and this is very, very important, especially with, and I'm just going to speak to it. It's a very American centric view at this point, but as an American and having just gotten off the phone with my American father, I'm like in that too. But with all the politics, all the language that's happening right now in the world, and it's not just in the US, it's literally everywhere because this is politics. It's really important to be tuned in to what is being said versus what is being felt, because language is being manipulated constantly. And it's not just in politics, it's in Hollywood, which is another form of politics as well. But like, we need to be very clear on what we're hearing and how we're feeling it resonate in our body. So, where do we start? It's in the body. We have to get so in tune with the body and what we're feeling in the body that we can actually start to discern what different frequencies feel like in the body. And until you can do that, you're not really going to be knowing um, anything about what's actually going on, because you don't know how it's being received in your physical vessel. Your physical vessel is the reason why you know anything, right? We've become so detached, for those of us in the quote unquote Western world, from the body, that we don't know how to be in it. People will do anything to escape it. People will smoke or drink or have sex or watch TV or be on their phone or like, whatever, like overwork, like work out a lot, like work, like whatever it is, aholic. They'll aholic themselves in any of the things that they're doing just to avoid feeling, feeling. And it's really like, and this is what came up with in the conversation with my father right now. Like right now, the world is in a revolution to feel alive again. People are being called forward to feel alive. That's energy thrumming through your system. That's frequency resonating from externally to internally. It's your water, the water that you carry. We're like 80% water, resonating with whatever water and energy is external to you. How is it relating with the nature, with the elements, with the frequency? So it starts by coming into our bodies. We have to feel what we feel. We have to move it through. We have to learn how to detach from certain things, realizing their stories. We have to know what a story is. We have to know when we're attaching to one. We have to know how language resonates in our body, right? I was a big English nerd growing up, In school, my best subjects were the humanities. And I studied literature at university and like I taught English. So like this is something that, and I'm a poet. I'm a poet, I'm a writer. Like this is what I do. I play with language. When we have like the connotation, when you're teaching literature, when you're teaching, reading and comprehension, you teach what is the connotation of language? What is the cadence of language? And that's like very mechanical, and there's a place for that. I actually, always kind of struggled to teach some of it because it just came so naturally to me. I've always been kind of in tune with it. But the reality is, if you even just for a moment tune in to how somebody is speaking, to what they are saying and how they are saying it, you can get very clear on a very basic level. Does this feel good in my system or does this feel bad in my system? And that's just an easy place to start. Okay, this feels bad in my system. Okay, well, then you get curious. Why does it feel bad in my system? It feels bad in my system because I don't like what you said. It makes me feel like I'm a bad person. Okay, great. Now get more curious. Why do you think that? And that's when you start to excavate and go deeper and deeper. And that's where shadow work starts and transformation and alchemy and like, but that's where it begins. It's really very simple. It's the curiosity. That feels really good in my system. Oh, why does that feel good in my system? Well, you made me feel really good about myself when you said that. Oh, I just said what I said. I wasn't trying to make you feel good. It just is. Oh, interesting. Like, you just get curious about how things land in your physical body. Like, but we need to slow down in order to do that as well. And that's what we're also being called to is like, can we slow down? Sometimes it's felt like to a grinding halt in recent years where I'm just like, can we please, for the love of God, move? Can we move? Can I feel some semblance of forward momentum or literally any direction? Just any movement would be great, you know? Um, So I think it's getting really clear, like, what are you listening to? How is it being received? The next thing to do is to get really clear on what are you consuming, right? When it comes to language, when it comes to sounds, are you constantly on your phone, listening to the noise that is coming from your phone? Do you spend any time in nature listening to natural sounds? Are you listening to music that reinforces stories of narcissistic abuse in music? Are you listening to music that degrades women or men? Are you listening to music that is violent and grating on the ears? Or are you listening to music that evokes beauty and joy and prosperity? Are you watching programs on TV that are violent and horrific? Are you watching cold case murders? Like, and that's putting you to bed. Like, what are you watching? Are you watching evil triumphing over good? What are you watching? That is a consumption. What are you eating? What are you putting in your body? Is it whole food? Is it natural? Is it synthetic? Is there red dye in it? Right? Are there carcinogens in your food? Are there GMOs in your food? Where are you getting pesticide? Where are you getting your food? This is all frequency. And so, and the food is like an easier place to start because it's physical. Once we start to get into the abstract with language, it can sometimes feel more confusing because our brains get activated. And when the brain is trained to be overactive and overreactive over the body, that will be the pattern to go into the mind. So we have to train ourselves to be curious. We have to train ourselves in the like whatever tangible ways we need to come back into our body and away from the mind. But language is meant to be spoken. And I say that as a writer and a poet, and I love writing. But writing, even when it's written, is not meant to be set in stone. There's a reason that phrase exists. Because when writing moved from oral traditions into the written languages, they didn't have papyrus yet. They had stone. They would carve the writing into stone. They would paint it onto stone. Like it's it's not meant to be dead. It's meant to be living. Even when you write it in stone, stone is still inherently living. It just moves, it's earth just moving slowly. So writing is still meant to be fluid. Language is meant to be fluid. It's meant to evolve. It evolves with the nature around it. That's why language has been created as it has all over the world. It's based on whatever environmental place you've come from, that certain sounds, which originally were based on nature, would then come in. That's true light language. And then, yes, there's galactic light language, and we can get into all of that as well, but let's just keep it on Earth for now because that's challenging enough without bringing in the star seeds, like um, light language stems from natural sounds. Sanskrit, ancient Indian language and text, was based on the sounds of nature. It sounds like song when someone actually speaks it. So it's like, what is it? One of the mantras. It's been a while since I've done my Hindu mantras, but it's like Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushti Vardhanam. It's just right. Even in the Mediterranean, the Romance languages, Italian, there's a certain sing-songiness to it. French too, the Portuguese. English too. English has become very dense and calcified over time, though, for a lot of different reasons. But there's a beauty to it as well if you really allow it to just do its thing. Exhibit A is Shakespeare, which I will not nerd out on right now, but is a real thing. E. E. Cummings, too, was, American poet and writer from the 1950s, expat, part of the lost generation, also writing. Like, in ways that are profoundly beautiful. That is light language. You know it lands in your body as light language because it leaves you feeling lighter, not denser.
Mm, beautiful. I love what you're sharing there about yeah, becoming aware of like what we're consuming, what we're bringing into our bodies and into our vibrational field, into our energetic field, really, more than just, you know, as you said, food is such a great example of this. Um, but we have to get so deeply beyond just the physical and into what is the vibrational impact, what is the vibrational sense of everything that is coming into our experience, into our extrasensory perception of the world. And for so many of us, we don't even like, we're not raised in a way that says this is a thing that's happening, that you feel a lot of energy all of the time. But literally anyone and everyone I've ever spoken to about like vibrational extrasensory perception and what that is, like it's been made to look like this woo-woo mystical gift magical psychic thing, and it's like it's well it's not really. We all
Or,
have it whether we notice or not, but we've become so disconnected from our awareness of it. But everyone I speak to, they're like, oh yeah, okay, I totally felt that, or I totally noticed that. And we're just not raised in a space where it's like it's accepted that that is a normal thing or something to be aware of, or to know that actually is really vital to our health and well-being, to be able to manage, to be able to recognize, to be able to attend to in a deeper way. And so it goes, you know, deeper and deeper and deeper into like resonances and frequencies and all of this. And in becoming like, even with food, for me, it's like the coming into awareness of what is anything doing for me vibrationally. And I think this is a key to like, what are we, you know, as you're saying, it's like, what am I listening to? Am I listening to something violent that's bringing that into my cellular system or my whatever it is? And the curiosity of starting to go, well, why am I engaging with that? And really starting to go underneath and be like, what is the resonance, or what is the frequency that you are attempting, that your system is attempting to take from outside of self and imbue the system with, essentially. I had a client at one time who was getting frustrated with himself because he was engaging with a lot of like, I know nothing about video games. I'm going to show that really obviously right now, but um, a game that involved violence. I don't even know what it was, like guns and taking down the enemy, or so. I can't even remember the name of the thing now, but
guns and things.
regardless,
It's all the
guns
same.
and
Yeah.
things and stuff and boy
I too
boy
know
games.
nothing about no, nothing of the
I don't
things.
know.
Well, there's plenty of girls that are playing the violent games too now. So,
Yeah.
it's not gender specific anymore.
Yeah.
People are just being called into more violence. But yeah, sorry, keep
Yeah.
going.
So he was getting frustrated with this, right? And he was getting frustrated with the pattern of that. And he's like, I can't seem to put it down. I was like, okay, well, what if there's nothing wrong with this? What if there's nothing wrong with you engaging with this? What if your system is being highly intelligent and trying to seek out something it feels like it lacks? And it's really how I would view anything, is like, are we looking outside? So this is what, you know, we go from like codependency where I'm trying to get validation from outside of myself, or I'm going to, you know, emotional eat, for example. And my go-to is like mac and cheese generally. Because I'm like, well, it's comforting. And we can look at it from a surface layer of like, oh, well, I'm doing these things because it's an unhealthy coping mechanism. But I think when we start to bring in the awareness of actually your system is incredibly intelligent, there's a reason your energetic system is seeking out this particular frequency. When you can identify that frequency, then you can go, oh, so that's what I actually need to resource and up within myself, or cultivate in a different way if I don't like it in this way. And so, like with the video games, we started unpacking that, and it was like, oh, well, I want to feel empowered. I want to feel, it gives me a sense of feeling powerful. And it's like, all right, so that's a thing that I think, well, power particularly is something a lot of us outsource. And we go, oh, well, in association to this, money, status, this, that, the other, I'm going to feel like I have more power, but it's not innately held within at that point. What we need to do is cultivate inner power and sense of empowerment at a frequency level. And so we can look at all these things. Like with food, that's why I don't have a particularly judgmental relationship with food, because I'm aware, I'm like, oh, I'm eating this chocolate cake because it's providing me with comfort or dopamine or whatever it is. And it's like, there's a deep awareness, right? This is not a long-term solution to this, but I'm going to actively choose to engage because that is the resonance that I desire to feel in this moment and experience in this moment. And when I view it from an energetic perspective, it doesn't feel that there's an intelligence to this system that's like, yeah, like do the thing. And it's given me a more intuitive relationship with food and frequency and energy and all of these things over time. Because it's like, oh, what's the energy that I need? I may not know what vitamins exactly my body needs, right? But I do know that I go through a period of time where through the energy of things, I'm like, oh, well, I really need like 6 eggs every day this week, or like whatever it is. Or it's like right now, I really need the red meat frequency. Like my body really needs that. And so through that kind of awareness of the intelligence of the system, it becomes more innate, becomes more natural, becomes more attuned to what's really needed. Because I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, my body lies. My body wants loads of sugar. My body wants this. And a
It
big
doesn't.
part of, or not trusting the body's response because we've had a lot of trauma, or not trusting the
Yeah.
body's response because of our life experiences, or because, we try to control the way our body looks or feels for so long. But it's like food is a great place to start practicing. Like, what is the resonance and videos or music and things? It's like, what is this actually? What is the sensing? What is the frequency I'm absorbing here? And what is it that I truly want out of this? And starting to feel into that and assume that there is an intelligence that is there, that is guiding in some way. It really starts to give you access to that perspective of like, oh, what am I bringing into my system right now? If I'm listening to the news 24 hours a day, like, I'm sorry, why is my body addicted to fear and the adrenaline of that and shock and cortisol,
Yeah.
right? It's like, yeah, of course, like we've trained our bodies to behave in very different ways than our natural, but we can restore that by, as you said, like getting into the curiosity. What is that resonance that I'm like trying to get? And if I bring it inwards, then does that change? Does my addictive nature to grasp for something start to loosen up, start to like dissipate in its intensity?
I think that's so beautifully said, and I like there's like a just a slight distinction between when you say like what is my body trying to grasp versus what am I trying to avoid? And that's a beautiful recalibration of energy of being like, well, what am I trying to get out of choosing this thing that seems unhealthy that I could be judging myself over? Oh, I want comfort right now versus I'm trying to avoid being alone right now because I feel like I don't want to feel lonely. Like those are, it's like a glass half full, glass half empty kind of mentality. So I love that just like slight shift in how to view, what's coming through at any given moment. And yeah, I think it's interesting because it's not just that we've been taught to like distrust the body, it's that we've been taught that all of these attunements we have to more magical frequencies and resonances is actually like weird, and not weird in the way that that word actually is meant to be used, which is like quite beautiful and synchronistic and magical. But weird as in I'm don't want to have anything to do with you because you're a freak of nature, right? Like, and now it's interesting because I'm seeing so many more reels that are like, if you sit this way, you might be autistic and you might be hypersensitive to the world around you. And I'm like, oh, well, based on all of these things, I very well might be like on the autism spectrum in a way that I've never been tested before, right? But like high functioning, quote unquote, autism in the world. But for so many of us who feel really, really, truly sensitively and attuned to more natural frequencies, I think that there is an interesting thing that's coming online that more and more people are finding these like, undiagnosed, autism like traits. But for me, I really, really struggle with like almost any labels these days. I question a lot of them, especially when it comes to diagnoses, because I think that, and I'm not against modern science when I say that, or like modern medicine when I say it, but I do think there is over prescription of labels to the point where it's like somebody is just differently attuned to the natural rhythms of the world to you. And actually, that makes them very special. Like, right,
Mm.
I haven't fully delved into the telepathy tapes, but there's this whole thing on the telepathy tapes where it's like children are attuned to certain frequencies where they're psychic. And they might be like on the autism spectrum. I might be completely making that up, but there is something in there that keeps pinging me that I'm like, all right, I gotta go back and like listen to these things. So there is something around, and are like nonverbal children, for children who are nonverbal till later in their years. There's something like labeled as inherently wrong about them because they're nonverbal. Well, they're just tapping into a nonverbal world that you can't see yet, and they're not ready to speak yet, and that's okay. But it's really interesting. I mean, but words, it's like bringing it back to like consumption of words is like something like how it kind of started here is words or spells, right? We spell words. It's called spelling. It's like literally obvious. It's so ridiculous. Oh, are you spelling? Yeah, I'm spell casting. It's words or spells, right? And in the Bible mythology is like God spoke and created the world through frequency. And so, and this is in the Four Agreements as well. It's like be one of the Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz is be impeccable with your word. What does that mean? It means be aware of what you are saying because words are spells. And he uses the example of like a mother who has a headache. And she and the daughter is just like little girl daughter is just singing away and she's just having her own like little dreamy childlike fairyland day. And the mom is like having such a headache and she's just frustrated. She goes, why don't you just shut up? You can't even sing anyways. And the little girl stops singing for the rest of her life because now that's a spell that's been cast where she believes that she can't sing and she won't be loved by her mother if she does. She will be rejected by society, essentially. That's what it gets down to the root of that belief system. So be impeccable with your word. What are you saying?
Mm.
And there's a lot of people with a lot of things to say these days, allegedly. And most people, I'll be very honest, are just full of shit. Most people are not worth listening to. And I'm not trying to be rude and be like, you should shut up and stop talking, but like, maybe you should. Not you, Jess, and probably not anybody actually listening to the podcast, but like, there are some people that like, maybe you should just stop talking. actually get clear on what you are saying, because what spells are you casting as you are speaking? My lord, my lady, what are you saying?
This is so true
It's
though. It's like come into silence and stillness until you can hear, until you can understand the mechanics of energy. I get very, 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 I think just, I want to say incensed or frustrated, but really I think as it evolves more and more, it's more fueling because energetics is my absolute fucking nerd zone. Like I like studied this till the fucking cows come home. And there's a lot of people with a lot of opinions and thinking that they are correct and that they need to give their opinion on every single thing that is going on in the world around them. And it's like, I get it. Also, the very first lesson I was ever given by plant medicine was it is only true if you observe it. It's only real if you observe it, if you are holding it in observation. And this is just quantum physics. Like at this point, I'm kind of like, I don't understand how people don't get this because actually it's just quantum physics. Like scientifically at this point, we fucking know, right? This is not woo woo shit. This is not shit that like, you know, some mad psychic made up. Like I know I have my Jess's made up science, but this is like actual science people did actual science things and have actually proven we create our understanding and experience of the world through the way we perceive and view the world. What are we doing through our words if we are creating more and more of these opinions and putting them out there in the world? You are, use the word calcifying in a conversation we were having earlier. It's like you are calcifying the reality that you are complaining about. You are giving it more energy. You are feeding and building this in the energetics. It drives me a little bit mad.
just a
It's
little
like
bit.
just
Come on, Jess, how's it really make you
just a
feel?
tad.
Don't hold back, baby.
It is frustrating because it's like, a lot of us get told, oh, you're just bypassing, you can't just ignore reality, la 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 la. And so if it's like if you really understood quantum physics, if you really understood how energy moves, if you really understood and took the time to feel sense in your body, because it isn't actually complicated. Actually, we all have this truth system radar in our system, which is moving so fast through our lives that we're not sensitized to feel. And it's just deeply dropping in and observing and watching, how does energy move? How does this operate in the world? How does it create? How do we experience things? How do we perceive life? And how do our experiences change as we change our perception? Like I'm sure we've all had the experience before where it's like you can read a book or a sacred text, particularly sacred texts, when they are transmissions of light, right? In the language of light, because it has been brought through, particularly when they're transmissions. You can pick that up and you can read that at 1 year in your life and you can go about your spiritual journey. 3 years later, you can read the same thing and be like, wow, did they just add paragraphs into this book that I never read before? Because like a new layer of reality, your eyes become cleaned. Rumi talks about it as clean the window, right? We're cleaning the windows and cleaning the mirror also, the clean the mirror and the reflection in it. And so you can see you are the mirror and the reflection. You have to clean your perception, and that evolves and changes over time. It's the evolution of awareness and consciousness. It's like we have to become aware of how we are creating our collective experience as well. It's like the things you're sharing so exuberantly and, frustratedly or whatever it is online, you're calcifying other people's experience. and inviting them to join you in this co-created woven web of whatever shitty reality you're in. This gets me around where people are like, I'm going to fight against blah, blah. And I'm going to get a bunch of people together and we're going to fight again. I'm like, awesome. So you know what you're doing there is you're calcifying the reality in which that has to exist. In order for you to engage in a collective fight against something, you require the thing you're fighting against. And you're bringing it into tension. In tension, you hold the energy still in a point of tension, which creates it in the reality. Like if we understood, again, this is not woo woo, la la land. This is like literally how energy moves. I know you know this, but for our audience, it's like, this is how it works. It's through the way we see, through the way we perceive. It's so important to clean all of that up and understand how to like really engage with energy and frequency in a new way, the way we bring it in, the way we speak it out, the way we share it from a place of deep stillness. When we talk about heart-centered consciousness on this planet, we mean coherence, we mean consciousness, we mean congruence within the system. And that requires that stillness and that real quiet to sense and feel, what am I transmitting here beyond the words? Also with the words, what words am I using? How is that impacting other people's experience of reality as well? I could go on and on and on, but like,
Well, I mean, even the word
I won't.
coherence, right? Because I think this is the other piece, and this is why I love language so much, but also I had a client once. I was teaching her this beautiful Russian woman, a Russian vedma, a witch in Russian, a Russian vedma. I was teaching her English, and she was like, why is English the universal language? Like, why did that? I mean, I know on a historical level, like why, but like why on an esoteric, energetic level is it English? And it's like for me, what came through, I was like, well, English is such an amalgamation of various different languages. And there are such codes in English language, and you can call them puns or homonyms that are spell casting transmissions that we've become so dense to them. It's become like it's almost like somebody's like, well, why would you use that specific language? And somebody's just not paying attention to what that language actually means. Like the word coherence, here or har, which is heart, which is part of like the womb, the mountain. And actually, I got this translation of the Aramaic word wrong of hara in a former podcast. It's not cave, it's mountain, but you would go into the cave in the mountain. That was part of this like womb initiation into the darkness. But coherence, what are you cohering with listening with the world around you? What are you co-creating from a coherent space from the heart space, from the hearth, from the womb space with the world around you, coming into coherence, right? If you start to, this is why I love playing with language. You start breaking it down, you go, wow, look at all the spells in here, right? Look at this. That when you did it with intention, in like it's in the language. It's literally coded in. And I'm not saying that other languages don't have that. I certainly am not an expert in, multiple languages. I started just speaking French again for the first time after learning it for 6 years. It's just like, I am not an expert in earth languages, but I am an expert in English, and I know that there's some sort of reasoning for it, and that language is very powerful in how it holds the spells. And we have been taught to disassociate. I mean, even if look at how language has become so dense, back in like, 19th century, Jane Austen, Bridgerton, times people would have been like, ah, and how do you do, my fair lady? Or like whatever it is, it would just been flourished and beautiful. And that's why so many beings like love watching and like reading about these time periods because there's a romanticism to the language. That's so evocative of the senses. It makes you feel something. And to the point where now if somebody asks you how you're like, like that's a response. It's a grunt. Like somebody's like, how dense is the language that we've gotten to that it's hardened us to the point where we do this calcifying of action, of frequency in action, like um it's it's written in stone. We've become that dense to the magic of the frequency around us, of the frequency we emit. And so this again, coming back into light language is like, does it? It's just very simple. Do you feel light after you hear it? This is why, like, I received a light language activation towards the end of 2022, like worked with a master in this. And by the end of like even just the first lesson, I started speaking and I was like, I don't know what the hell is going on. And my rational brain was like, you're insane. And like my teacher was like, you're speaking ancient Egyptian like light language of the Hathors. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. Sure. Like, great, love that. But it's like there doesn't need to be a translation of the literal words. It just is. So like if I were to tap in and just to speak to something that's in a frequency, it's like Arianakata arka ashta. Uyanata ana awe 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 uf yana. Yana yanakata uf yana atya ufta urshta ushta ushta uryana tawe. Iya hanawe. Like, I don't know what I said, but I know what I felt. Right. And I felt very effusive in my, is this like, can you hear it? Can you hear it? That's what it feels like as I'm saying it. But I don't know that that's like, I'm like, this sound means this word. Like, it doesn't mean that. And to me, that's just heart language. When I started drinking plant medicine back in 2019, and I was sitting with the Colombian and Latin American shamans that I was working with, I turned to my mentor and I was like, what are they saying when they're like clicking their tongues and making the whooshing sound? Like, what does any of that mean? And my teacher was like, it's light language, it's spirit language. And I was scared of it at first. I couldn't comprehend it. It sounded scary because I'd been taught to be afraid of language that sounded like quote unquote witchcraft, you know, and it is witchcraft. But now that perception of what that actually means is just the shamans being so in tune with nature and spirit that they're just channeling the energy and moving the energy with sounds, with frequency. It doesn't need to be an actual word. And I think that that's a beautiful thing to be able to speak to somebody without saying anything and saying something without saying something. You know what I mean? That's where it starts to get really interesting. But we have to come into the subtle bodies of awareness for that. We have to get still. We have to get quiet. We have to shut up, humble ourselves. Yes, you might have opinions, but are they worth hearing it? Probably not. I would say 98% of most people's opinions are not worth hearing. I'm not trying to be rude about that. I'm not trying to be a bitch about that, but it's like most of the time people are, and I'm going to include myself in that as well. I'm not saying like everybody but me does this. Like that's not true. If you've been listening to the podcast, you know how much I love to talk. I've like listened to it. I go, God, you just need to shut up a little bit more. Let's stop. So I'm including myself in this as well. But most speaking is really unnecessary for most people
A lot of the time.
a lot of the time.
Yeah. We don't slow down to really feel it. The light language is beautiful. So
Hmm.
beautiful. could feel that so much. And I'm like, oh, of course. I'm like, I recognize this. Like we have very similar light language, actually. It's like, oh, clearly we're coming from the same planet here. Oh, it's beautiful.
Right. Right. And
And
like that's you can tap into the galactic star seeds on that if you want to. But like it doesn't matter. The thing is, it actually doesn't matter. The brain wants to know, but it doesn't matter. It's
but
part
the
of the
whole
same
point
family.
actually is that the brain doesn't know. And I think this is where frequency comes in, is like when we're looking at how are you going to be a part of healing the planet? How are you going to be a part of healing the hearts of other human beings? How are you going to be a part of creating something new and beautiful in this world? Well, frequency is where it is at. Frequency and the resonance, that is the important thing. And it has to get past the mind. We cannot solve all of these issues that have been created from the mind through the mind. It is literally the mind that created these fucking things. So we have to go around the mind, and we need to, sort of sidestep the brain a little bit and come into this understanding of frequency. So as you were speaking to with like, I used to hear it even in the Shipibo language, like it's very much language of the light in nature. It's so incredibly beautiful, and moving energy through resonance in the voice, alchemizing and changing energy. We know how to do this. It is so innate. Babies do it. They gurgle and they do this and they make this sound, and children scream or laugh or whatever it is. Sound shifts energy. It changes patterns of energy, breaks up structures, right? So when we're looking at webs of fixed, rigid, calcified consciousness created through words and connotation, like in the English language, you look at, we could say the word poverty, for example, and you're going to have like 20 million other neural pathways and connections and all these different things and ideas that are stuck in that structure. Energy can't move there. What can we bring in? Well, we can shock it. We can laugh and like shatter the energy. We can break the neural pathways through different energetic expressions and resetting and realigning those perceptions and those connections and those awarenesses. And a lot of these sounds, this bringing through a vibration and frequency in a different way, starts to break up those energies, starts to create new potential for it to move in a different way, for it to breathe in a different way. And light language, I particularly enjoy. Like my experience channeling that through was so beautiful, was so profound, because it goes past the mind, because it doesn't have words, because it's not attached to all of these connotations. It's not attached to all of these webs of, I mean, the most common example, right, is like when we say tree. We know this one. You say tree, and there's all these things that you attach to the idea of a tree that we think about. But in the channeling of light language, like we don't have those connotations. We don't have these connections to concepts or identities or your placement personally within the web of whatever has become rigid. And there's a beautiful, in more indigenous languages, I'm thinking of like more phonetic languages, more indigenous languages, more earth-based, spirit-based languages. Think of like Maori, languages like this, Hawaiian. There is someone somewhere did some research, and it stuck with me for years, but it actually starts to reconnect and synchronize the right and left hemispheres of the brain through the sounds, because this is language that is original template language, right? It stops separating the two hemispheres of the brain and begins to bring it back together. And so working with light language, I'm like, okay, I understand that this is a frequency language. This is a language of energy that just gets to keep moving. It's not about what the mind thinks. And the potential for healing the brain by going around it and underneath it is huge. So when I was in a extremely psychologically, spiritually abusive relationship, that I'm not going to go into the long story, but where I ended up was that I had PTSD, couldn't leave the house, and I couldn't look anyone in the eyes. I couldn't work and was really decimated. I had nothing left. I'd been cut off from friends, family, all of these things. It was very fast, very hard, and very extreme in the name of seeking spiritual truth, as we do. And all I had left really was prayer and connection to God. Because I kept having faith through that, thank goodness, because otherwise it would be a mess. But part of the healing for me was because I didn't trust my own mind anymore. I didn't trust my thoughts. I didn't trust my reality. I didn't trust my reality. My concept of reality was deeply broken. So I didn't trust anything or anyone, including myself. And it was light language that started to heal my body and my mind and my voice and my sense of connection. And I would sit in front of my altar every day. And I would just, because I couldn't do much else at this point, I would just sit in front of my altar every day. And I would just talk to God. And it was like, okay, start bringing the light language through. And at first it just felt like gibberish because I felt really disconnected. I had worked with light language before. It wasn't that it was new, but it was like, this is what you need to reroute back into, because this is going to heal your brain. This is going to heal your brain, your neural pathways. It's going to heal the PTSD. It's going to heal your sense of self-trust and your connection with who you are, with your voice, so that you can speak your truth again. And so I would sit there and I would just keep going. I would just start speaking light language and I would keep going, and it felt weird, but I would keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going until I was bringing through the frequencies that my body needed to heal, that my heart needed in order to heal, that my brain needed in order to heal. So it's like, we can judge these things and go, oh, it's so weird. We see people doing light language on TikTok and all of this. And like the general public might look at this and be like, oh, that's so weird. That's so strange. That's so out there. But this is huge healing potential. There is a technology in this that goes around, beyond, and underneath the mind. The same way we talk about archetypes and we talk about myth and we talk about storytelling and all of this, those representative understandings of trying to transmit a deeper meaning. The same here is true with sound, with language, with the words that we choose. There is a transmission of a deeper meaning, a deeper connection, a deeper frequency. And our body is energy at its deepest level. Underneath everything else, it's energy, it's spirit. And if we can communicate with ourselves from the level of energy, from the level of spirit, from the level of light, that's the deepest place at which we're going to start to heal. It's the deepest place at which we can start to rewire ourselves. And like, don't get me wrong, it took me time to recover from this and get my sense of self back, or even a new sense of self. But all things considered, it was actually remarkably much quicker than we would have expected. Had I gone to therapy and hashed this out, I did in fact have therapy at the same time as well. I had a lot of support, but I had a lot of time in nature. I had a lot of time working with light language. I had someone who would listen and hear me, but really like the deepest self-healing pieces were through sound and through prayer and through light language and through frequent in nature. I was helping an artist a lot in her studio at the time. So it was like, what was helping? Nature, creativity, resonance, frequency, sound, singing, prayer, it's the arts, the sciences, the incredible technologies of energetics and frequency. It's really powerful what we can do for
Mm.
ourselves, what we can put into the world. So it's like that's what this is. This stuff isn't to be made fun of by any stretch of the imagination, right? This is like it's
It's all
deeply powerful.
well, it's been made fun of because we've been taught to disbelieve it. It's like ridiculous that you could have a sound bowl put on you and hit and like over your organs and it's going to heal your organs. That sounds ridiculous. We have a sister who does that and it's powerful. It's wildly powerful. I've had insanely beautiful purges and healings because I've had a sister who is attuned so deeply to certain frequencies and bowls and to the sounds of the universe and to what she is channeling through that she puts the bowl on the body, she hits it, and then it heals certain parts of the organs. And it's like, it's fascinating. You know, it sounds woo-woo because we've been taught to forget the magic, right? This is where the fairy worlds start to open up to us. This is where the spirit worlds start to open up to us. When you tap into language, which world, which reality are you tapping into? Which frequency are you tapping into? Right? This is where talk therapy is helpful, but at a certain point, it stops being helpful because it usually keeps you in the same frequency of the energy of the story that you're telling, and you don't ever actually embody it or do something about it. You just go and speak for 50 minutes, and by the end of the 50 minutes, you finally got to the thing, and then it's time to go, and then you have to live life again for another week, 2 weeks, a month before you go to therapy again. You're not actually getting any answers or closure, you know? Not to, poo-poo therapy. There's a space for it. It's an important thing. But at a certain point, it's like, what is going on here? Are you healing from all the
Mm,
therapy you're going to? Like, and I can say that, like, look, and I'm gonna just love on my dad for a moment. My dad and I've had such a tumultuous relationship my whole life. I've cut my father out of my life multiple times, vowed never to speak to him again. And I would say I'm really close with my father now. Like I just had a call with him this morning. It was so beautiful. He has a way to tap into energy and frequency, and it's a different thread, than my thread, but ultimately it's the same language, like that we can kind of get to. But he was in therapy most of his life, talk therapy for most of his life. And I would say in the last 4 years, and it was the last time I cut my father out of my life was about 4 years ago. At the last time I cut him out, he did so much work and he started calibrating into different types of healing modality that were not only fit talk therapy. My dad is not the same man that he was 4 years ago in a beautiful
mm,
way. And I just like, so I speak to it, it's like it's helpful, but at a certain point, you have to realize there's so many other ways to heal. What language are you using? What realm is it allowing you access to in your physical vessel, in your imaginal and real vessel, on all of these different levels? Like one thing I learned recently, which is so beautiful, and I'm just like so titillated by it. And I'm like really like I'm feeling the effervescent inner champagne bubbles around like what this means for me. Here in Bali, the language, there's Indonesian language, but then there is specific language just of the island of Bali because it's such a unique place. It's been colonized by so many different people over the years, but it's always maintained like this incredibly unique energy because this is a very sacred place. This is the high heart chakra of the world. This is a vortex, a cleansing place for the world. Anyways, the language of Bali, a lot of the foreigners think that the word is Bahasa. Do you speak Bahasa? And it's like, oh yeah, I speak Bahasa. I speak the language. I like speak the language of Bali. Well, I recently learned that Bahasa just means the language. It means speaking. And it's like, oh, do you know Bahasa is like, it's like, do you speak speaking? Do you know the language? People will ask that. When the actual language of Bali is Bali. It's not Balinese, it's Bali. So it's like now you get into it, it's like if you learn the language of Bali, you learn the language of Bali, right? If you learn the words and the sounds of Bali, it opens up a realm of what this magical island actually is. And it's deeply spiritual. And I'm like, oh, I've not learned the language of Bali yet on a literal verbal level, but also like on a spiritual level. I get it, but I haven't really tuned into it yet. So it's like, all right, I have to get those Bali language lessons in now because I think I'm actually ready for it. I feel I'm ready for it. I feel like I'm being invited into that world right now. So when you tune into certain languages and frequencies, again, what level of reality is it calling your being forward into? What is it evoking within you? Is it evoking for you to stay in a space of smallness and contractedness and calcification and anger and fear and insert word here that feels contracted? Or is it actually calling you to step forward into expansion, into openness, into love, into authenticity, into your courage, into spirit? Are you inspired to actually learn the language of God? That's confronting. That's a confronting
Mm.
question. But what a beautiful question to consider for ourselves. Are you ready to actually invite God into your heart and removing, talk about a word loaded with connotations. God. A lot of people avoid, I avoided the word God for a very long time
Mm.
because it evoked certain meanings that were calcified and defined in my belief system that I was not happy with. And I thought that I would also be persecuted or projected onto or rejected if I used the word God. You're going to be a Bible thumping freak. No one wants to fuck a Bible thumping freak. Nobody wants that. I mean, everybody's got a kink, but like probably not. It's just like, you know, it's there was there was a connotation with that. But it's like when you're really ready to open yourself up to spirit and to God, you have to get very clear on the language
You have to get
that's
really
being
far
used
beyond
and that you're using.
the
Exactly. It's like
language.
well, because language can so easily be manipulated. I mean, I think PR and marketing and politics is a great example of how deeply bastardized and twisted language can be used, right? Lawyerese, legalese to like get exactly what somebody wants without saying what is really happening. It's tricky language. You have to be that's where coming back into the body and into the frequency. What's really
Mm.
being said? What's also, here's the spaciousness, what's being said, but what is not being said? And you have to be really clear on that too. Get into that void space of what's not being, ooh, that's interesting. They said this is where I'm being directed to look. This is the director's lens of language telling me to look right here in this narrow scope. But what's not being said over here? That's actually way more interesting energetically. I should probably be actually paying attention to that.
Mm.
So we have to be really clear on the language again of how it's feeling on our body. Vital to do so.
Yeah. It's a very interesting time, and it's like it's more important than ever to keep dropping back into how your engagement with the external world feels. Because despite my preference to not view the world in this, like, oh, there's nefarious, this, that, and the other out to get me, I believe that I'm more powerful than worrying about this kind of stuff. Also, again, we create the world through perception. So I don't grasp to this, but it's like have awareness at the same time. Like there's a real awareness of the fact that governments, intelligence agencies all over the world have been studying the human psyche for a very long time and how to manage our psyches. And language is a really strong way to do that, right? I remember in school, in high school, also studying an incredible amount of language arts. And in journalism, so I did a diploma in mass communications and journalism, but we did it in high school as well, where it's like you have to look at framing in images, framing in words, framing in language, framing in how things are put across, what language is being used, because it is very evocative and drawing parallels between things that are not particularly related. There's a lot of strong language, particularly in the US, being used at the moment that is clouding people's judgment on both sides, clouding people's discernment. I don't give a shit which side you're on here. It doesn't even matter, because it's just, it can be super positive language or it can be super negative language, drawing parallels. And if you had to take out and rewrite everything, this is an exercise we used to do. We used to go through like newspaper articles and things like this, magazine articles or news story pieces, and we'd have to de-bias the language. We'd have to pull it apart and make it completely neutral, which is what news was intended to be originally, but now it's not. It's all, how do we sell the papers? So, or the, subscriptions or whatever thing is. So the bias is there to hack your nervous system, your emotional response system, your bias oriented system. It is there to hack your psyche, hack your biological processes, your natural tendencies towards certain things and information and sensations, and lead you in a direction that you perhaps didn't even consider whether you had any choice in or not. So it's like, start questioning, start looking, go, okay, well, why are they using that really strong language when it's just a man? It's a dude. The man walked down the street, like, as opposed to like the evil, terrible, blah blah, who, whatever, like
It doesn't, it
whatever
doesn't,
example
it
we're
doesn't matter.
using.
Doesn't
Yeah,
matter. It doesn't matter. It's literally like what is being said. And I think unfortunately, because like it's fortunate now because I actually think it's all coming to the surface more and more and more. But it's like, who is paying for what is being said?
always.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's and like who's writing the checks? And if you don't know who's writing the checks, or it's being very unclear who is in charge of the money, the real like like especially this is especially true with scientific studies. Again, I am not against science. I am just saying be very clear on what you are consuming and ask questions, because when we externalize our own authority and power to somebody else who we believe knows more than us, then we are just relieving ourselves of our innate curiosity, and we are disempowering ourselves. So empower yourselves to get clear, like who's paying for the study to say like coffee is bad for you? Who's paying for the study to say coffee is good for you? Like literally, that's why it comes back like to me, it comes
Mm.
back to intention. How is it making you feel? Right? I can sit there and I can listen to like I don't know, I'll say like a hardcore, like I'll say rap song. That's not necessarily, and for me, hardcore is like I'm listening to Cardi B. Like, like it's like that. That's what I mean when I'm listening to like hardcore gangster rap, like, that's what I mean. So heads up when I'm like saying that. But if I'm listening to something that's like intense, like overtly sexual, like, like I don't know whatever the language is, that's not necessarily leaving me feeling like I'm with the angels, you know. If I'm in the mood to listen to that music and it's bringing me a lot of energy and aliveness, and I'm like deep in the sexy juiciness of whatever that song, especially like Cardi B, is like evoking, I'm like, that intention is still pure, in alignment with the frequency that I need in that moment to move the energy. If I'm smoking a cigarette and I'm like clear on what the intention, what am I doing when I'm smoking this cigarette? Am I escaping? Am I using it because I want to connect with the tobacco? Am I doing it because it's bringing me joy? As long as I know what the actual intention is and I'm aware of it and I'm okay with it, it's still in alignment, right? It doesn't matter if it's bringing me comfort or escapism or like whatever. If I'm in alignment with it, I'm in alignment with it. It still is in a high frequency. In a like if I'm doing it unconsciously and it's peppering my reality in a way that keeps me in states of awareness and behavior and being that are incongruent with how I actually want to live in the world, then it's out of frequency and it's going to lower the frequency. So, what is your intention with anything you do? I think this is, again, I'm going to bring it
Mm.
back to food because it's a tangible example that people can understand. Americans especially are obsessed with how the French can eat whatever they want. Butter, bacon, bread, cheese, like chocolate, coffee, wine for breakfast. And like especially American women, they're like, and French women are still like some of the most beautiful European women, like, known to exist. They're very chic, they're very polished, and they're very slender still. How is it possible that that French woman can do all of that? Well, first of all, the French don't put additives in their foods the way that the Americans do. But
Mm.
secondly, they're very intentional about how they eat. They eat for pleasure. They're not eating to like just like get through the 30-minute lunch break because they just have to and they need something quick and that's cheap because their job doesn't pays the minimum wage. It's not how it works. Like they're taking the time, they're taking the pleasure, they're taking 3-hour lunch breaks to enjoy life and the delicious food in front of them, to be connected with their food in a way that is deeply intentional. Even if they're not like praying over the food and you know, digging the beets out of the earth themselves, they're still deeply connected to their food in a way that, again, I'm just gonna like rag on Americans because it just is frickin' true. Americans are just disconnected. Just go to the store, pick up the plastic, whatever, and then bring it home and make it. And sometimes that's easy, and sometimes that's what's needed, and sometimes that's what we can afford. And what is your intention as you are eating it? The intention matters in terms of elevating or lowering your frequency and vibration. Again, what are you consuming and how are you consuming it? And are you okay with all of it? Are you allowing it?
Mm.
Are you at peace with it? It matters.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's about congruence. It's about coherence. I just want to add this note actually, because I think alignment is a word that in spiritual communities gets very conflated with uh, bliss and everything is good and everything is on the la la la, everything is right. Like we do this thing, we go right, wrong, good, bad, like all of that. And alignment is associated with like purity and light and be all the good and all of that. I'm so in alignment. I'm such a good human. No, no,
I love that voice,
no,
by the
no.
way.
You can be in that's my
I love that voice.
18th galactic superstar starseed priestess of the world star world voice, just in case anyone was unclear on that.
Oh,
Um
love her. We should have a whole episode in the future where we only talk like that, just
oh
for one
god.
episode. I don't, and see how long we can go for. I say we don't make it past 2 minutes before we hate ourselves entirely.
Exactly. We're gonna be like, we have to stop this now immediately. It's awful.
Talk about lowering our vibrational frequency. Yeah. Anyways, continue. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Alignment.
Alignment, exactly. But alignment is just in line. There is a line in the line. I'm in the line of the congruency, and congruency and coherence does not mean happy positive. This is sacred neutral. This is just like, as you were saying with coherence before, it's the co-beingness of all of my parts and aspects and all of that have come into line with one another. They are on the same fucking page. And if that means I'm going to be an asshole and be a bitch just whatever for whatever, or I'm going to speak some truth and I'm going to point something out and I'm not necessarily happy about it, if every part of me is like, my heart needs to express this and be honest and truthful about it, and my head is in the same place as my heart, in the same place as my body, same place as my soul, and there's not a part of me going, you're a horrible asshole and you should be ashamed of yourself. Like if I've got that thing going on, Like that is out of coherence. That is out of alignment, right? This is what you're speaking to, like tobacco. One of the hugest things that people have so much conditioning around, so much shaming around, like these are the things. And we go, well, no, because like, yeah, if I'm sitting there and this part is going, you're a terrible person and this is shameful and you shouldn't be allowed to do it. And you're like, oh, but I kind of want to. So you shouldn't do that. Like there's two parts of self arguing with each other. That is what creates incoherence, incongruence, out of alignment stuff. Alignment is just being in line with yourself. And it's like this is that piece where it's like mean what you say what you mean. All of these things,
Well,
right? Impeccable. What does it mean? Well, my words, my actions, my beliefs, my thoughts, my feelings are on the same fucking page with one another. And I've checked in, right? Where do we get confusion from? Well, because one part has decided it wants to do that. The other part has decided it couldn't possibly do that because it might upset someone. That's the issue, is the internal space. But if we just get on board and it's like, cool, if I get on board and decide I'm going to do something that's like the rest of the world might judge, fuck it. As long as I'm not in line, aligned with my own system, then energy can still move through the system because I'm not holding it in a tension of disagreement internally. The energy can still move, the energy can still flow. That's how we begin to play in different energies in the
well,
world.
I mean, even so that first of all, like that word alignment, I mean, as you're doing it, for those who are not watching the video but are hearing it, Jess, you're showing your hand going up and down the center of the body. And to me, I've played
Mm.
with that word with alignment and alionment, like the animal, the alignment. Well, the lion is an animal symbolically that is associated with the heart, with courage, right? I mean, and so it's like if you're in alignment, you are in alignment with the heart. If you're resonating from the heart space, then you're in congruence with all of those pieces of yourself. And that's where real frequency is felt. And this is when somebody is truly like, there's a lot of this pop culture movement around the world, be unfuckwithable. Those are the people who are truly unfuckwithable because they are in congruence with themselves at all levels. They're not being triggered. They're speaking to truth. You can tell that they are embodied. They're in body as they're speaking something. They've lived it. They've experienced it. They know it at a cellular level, at an ancient level. And that's where you can tell if you get so in your body that you can start to feel frequency. That's where your BS meter will start to go off a lot more. And your circle of friends will become a lot smaller. And what you consume will become a lot cleaner. Like it's actually really fascinating. But I think I found somebody recently who's like kind of a copycat of the things that I'm speaking to in the world. And let me just be very clear, I have a very small audience. I have a very small audience, and like I am not trying to say that, I might be very wrong in this, but I have noticed that there is somebody in my field who, when I change certain languages or certain things that I put out there, they too change how they are putting themselves out there to be perceived in the world. And I've noticed it over time, like it's the same thing that happens. And there's a part of me that came into like, I felt kind of like affronted by it. I was like, oh my God, somebody might be copying me. Like, how do I feel about that? And then I started going, you know what? Baby, where you're going, there's going to be a lot of copycats and they're not going to have your same frequency. And it's okay. They have their own flavor and frequency, and that's a fine. It doesn't actually necessarily make them wrong. Let them do what they do. I've been influenced by other people too. What a beautiful gift to be influenced. And if my little conspiracy theory of myself is true, like God bless them. Like how beautiful. And if I'm just being a narcissist, then that's fine too. Like I'm okay with all the things. But it's the bigger and more interesting thing that's come up for me is this idea of frequency. People can feel if it's not embodied. They really can. The real reals can really feel that. Even the real not reals can still feel it and be like, you're fucking phony. whatever it is. And I'm not saying that about this person in particular, but I do know, what I bring to the table is its unique, authentic frequency, and I think that that's and I'm just using myself as the example here. People can tell when somebody speaks from real embodied truth. Whether they're thinking about this the way that you and I think about it or talk about it on a daily basis or not, it's a very simple place to start. Does that feel phony or does that feel real? And I think that more people are inclined to actually pick out a phony than not if they really tune into it. And I don't think it requires like tremendous amounts of concentration. People can generally just tell.
It's true. And we're going to get more and more and more. I mean, this is why we're talking about frequency and this language and this coming into this awareness, is because everyone is going to be becoming more and more and more sensitive to energy. You need to be aware of what is going on and start listening to that. We are already seeing this on the planet, where cancel culture, call out culture, all of this is a thing. Everyone's like, they lied and they did this incongruent thing. We've gone a bit too far off the rails with this, but there is a sensing there. There is a knowing something is off, something is not right here, but we're waiting for action to prove this. You were waiting for the actions, and we've been taught, trained, conditioned to respond so deeply and think that synthetic input is normal, that things like the fear, the drama, the like all of that heightened state stuff, like, oh, a YouTuber went and did this and now they're like canceled and rah, 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 the terrible, terrible. Now there's proof. Look, there's proof. And people are going rabbit holing on the internet looking for the proof, like the TikTok detectives. This is a thing that they are going to find the answer. And it's like, hum, 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 hum. Like, it's like I'm going to chase down that
Like
thing.
a little Pac-Man.
Yes, like a little Pac-Man, like on a freaking mission to find the truth. It's like, cool. Like, yes, the world is awakening to, we need to find the deeper truth. What people don't understand is they're waiting to find people external to themselves, like tripping up or fucking something up, or like, instead of trusting their own radar, that's like, there's something off here. You don't have to wait and go prove that somebody else is doing something wrong. Stop giving it your attention. Stop giving it your awareness. Like, let it go. What is your addiction to this stuff, right? Same with food, synthetic food. You don't have to like prove that it's bad, wrong. Like, fucking have at it. Attune to something different, something clean, something new. Feel what the body really wants on a deeper, subtler level. We don't have to keep imbibing these addictive, over and over, self-perpetuating things. It's like you get to pull your energy and awareness and attention out of these things, because that is your creator power, is what you're pouring, investing your energy, your attention into, your emotional energy into. That is what you're creating more of. That is what you're bringing more into the world. Do you think the algorithms and For You pages are a mistake? No, it's like a metaphor for the universe. What you look at more, you get more of. The universe doesn't care if it's good or bad. So becoming attuned to the frequency, trust when your body senses, oh, there's something not quite right here. Also, not from the toxic perspective of like, oh, they're off, they're bad and wrong. No.
Yeah.
That frequency is not a match for your frequency system. That's it. That's how this
You just get to
works.
be curious about
It's
what
just a
that's
signal.
about.
That's all it is. Doesn't mean they're bad, wrong, horrible, terrible. They have entities or anything the like. Doesn't mean anything. Just means this frequency signature and your frequency signature in your body do not gel well. Therefore, we do not need to take this person down. You simply move the fuck away and go and engage with something that is a match. That is how it become in alignment.
Exactly.
That is how that
Well, it's
happens.
just, I mean, it's unvictimizing yourself too. You're talking about like easily going into the victimization piece, which is a low frequency vibration again, and it keeps us in perpetual patterns and behaviors that keep us
Mm.
in resonance. Like I told a sister recently, I don't know, I was going through like a hard time over something. And she goes, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." And I'm like, "Can you just I actually would love if you stop apologizing to me because you didn't do anything. And also like I didn't do anything and I'm not a victim of my circumstances here. I'm very clear and it's all okay. So I just don't need you to apologize to me." Like it keeps me in a state of perpetual victimization, which I'm very good at. I'm
Mm,
very good at victimizing myself. I've had many years of experience of it, and I can now tune into that frequency as soon as I go there and get the fuck out of there. It ain't true, baby girl. You know exactly what you're doing. It's okay. Get out of there. There are certain situations where being victimized by a situation does exist. I'm not saying it never exists, but most circumstances, and the one that I'm speaking to specifically in this context, I was just like, I'm just not a victim. It's okay. You can just stop apologizing. I love you.
yeah. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
huge difference between being a victim in a physical specific situation and circumstance versus existing from and within the shadow field of victim consciousness.
Yeah.
We have to move at it. That's supposed to be from what I hear through the grapevine, that is what is supposed to be transmuting off of the planet right now.
Oh,
So
phenomenal.
hopefully, so yeah, like being victimized, real story, true story. It's a thing that happens. And
Yeah.
victim consciousness and worldview, a whole other different fucking thing. That is where you do not know how to
Cool.
self-source your own power. That is where you need the world is happening to me. In psychology we would call it the locus. Where is your locus of control? Where is your
Hmm.
locus of control? Which is like, where do you place the power of circumstance? Is it outside of yourself? Do you believe everything is happening to you? Or do we come into the power of alchemy and transmutation where we go, you know what, anything can happen to me and I am going to fucking find the alchemical gold in that because the creator has wanted me to be here for some fucking reason. That maybe that hurt, but here we are. I'm going to find the wisdom. I'm going to find the gold. I'm going to find the magic. I'm going to turn it into something beautiful so that I can then transmit a frequency from the heart out into the world of what this is.
Mm. Well, I feel like that's actually maybe this is a nice place. We've been talking about this for a long time. We could probably talk about this for a lot longer as well, but I feel like this might even be the thread into one of the next episodes, which is like
Mm,
I'm thinking of your girl Carolyn Miss, and I'm thinking of like I don't remember what she calls them specifically, but I always refer to them as the wounded archetypes,
mm,
right? How we can victimize, like play the child, play the prostitute, or play the self-saboteur,
saboteur, yeah.
right? So like I wonder if that's like to we can speak to maybe some of those alchemizing those archetypes in one of our next episodes to like reel power back into the center of locus of control to ourselves. So I feel like that's
Let's
maybe
do
where
it.
we're going next. Yeah.
I'm obsessed with all of this and
I
also how it plays in
yeah.
the gene keys and
Oh gosh. Oh my God.
the shadow, the victim to the gift to the like, yes, how do we alchemize the victim consciousness into power, wisdom, transformation, and
Oh
collective
my God.
transformation too? So
Well,
juicy,
can we
juicy,
great,
excited.
let's end this episode and let's record the next one now. Like I'm ready. Like let's go. I'm actually not. I need a break, but like I'm so excited is all I'm
I'm
trying to
excited
say.
too. It'll be
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah, looking
Mm.
forward to it.
Cool.
Yay.
Thank you, sweetheart, for your
Thank
wisdom. This was
you.
really fun, interesting
This was
weave yet
beautiful.
again.
So fun. So beautiful. Thank you for all your
Mm,
wisdom. This was
mm,
so beautiful to record.
my
One of my
pleasure.
favorites.
Yeah, frequency, it's our jam, baby. It really is. So thank you to everyone who's listened. Thank you. Please share, leave a rating, review. We'd be super grateful. Leave it in the notes, comment, like just
Subscribe. Do all of the things.
subscribe.
Help
Do
us
the
out.
things. Yeah, help us out. Help us if you like what we're saying and you want more of this type of frequency emitted into the world. Help by sharing and supporting us. We'd be so grateful, my loves. Like, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Beautiful. Have
Yeah.
a beautiful week ahead. Lots of love.
Ciao.
Bye.